My goodness, where do we even start? Bungie have just held a very significant reveal for Edge of Fate, Year of Prophecy, which is the year of content we've got coming up, and even the next expansion, Renegades, that we'll be getting in December of this year. So they talk about that stuff, they show off some new locations, trailers, all that kind of stuff as always. They even talk about content in 2026, story elements for Edge of Fate, new enemies, abilities, and of course new gameplay systems, the armor rework, reward tiers, world tiers, and they speak about some of the upcoming seasonal updates that we'll get after the next expansion. That will include a return to the Plaguelands from Destiny 1, which was certainly unexpected. We're going to be getting loads of sort of event and seasonal updates. That will include Arms Week, which is a new opportunity to introduce a new weapon, as well as a shooting range to Destiny. There's a lot of stuff to talk about from the reveal today, guys, so we're going to do our best to break it down. As always, share your thoughts below, and as a lot of the viewers on this channel haven't yet subscribed, that would make a massive difference if you want to be kept up to date with more content. But now let's get into it. First up, Edge of Fate will drop July 15th, so that's confirmed. Bungie offered up a pretty dope cinematic with Orin, the emissary of the Nine, a badass version of Orin with armor as well. And they speak about how the Nine are individuals, not necessarily one hive mind. They each have different wants, which hold massive influence over the events that we see unfold in our past, but also what we'll see in the future. And they say what they call the Fate Saga, the next saga of Destiny, is going to play out over several years. That's Bungie's goal. Edge of Fate will be the catalyst into that. And again, Edge of Fate will drop on July 15th, but also a second expansion for the year called Renegades will be dropping in December on December 2nd. So in terms of scope, they did say these expansions will be bigger than Rise of Iron and Destiny 1, but smaller than something like Forsaken. They also tease content drops for 2026 and two expansions. One of them is Shattered Cycle, and the other is The Alchemist. So obviously Bungie have plans for the next couple of years. Here though, we should show a new trailer for Edge of Fate, which shows off some very cool weapons, locations, activity content, and more. So check this out.
Observe, connect, conceal. Guardian, I had a vision. Conform, comply, return. They just wanted to show us disasters. Observe, connect, conceal. I'm not human anymore. Return, conform, comply. No one else should know what this feels like. Terminate your suspicion, Commander. Remove your scornful blindfold. Observe, connect, conceal, conform, comply, return. Observe, connect, conceal, conform, comply, connect, return.
So that was pretty juicy. You'll have spotted plenty of new gear, as well as some interesting enemies and abilities there. We're going to be invited to this new location called Kepler with a very specific purpose. This world is on the edge of our solar system, so it's kind of the stepping stone to what we'll discover in the next saga, and it's a world inspired by Dreaming City, but also dungeons, endgame content, and player-driven exploration and discovery. Bungie have said they'll introduce world tiers for the first time here, so we'll be able to unlock higher world tiers, and over time, that will improve the rewards that we unlock, but also of course, the difficulty, and they even said there'll be new secrets and mechanics that we find as we move through these higher world tiers. And they've spoken in the past about a non-linear story. Loads of core quests will be featured with the sort of main non-linear story, but also side quests that expand on characters and stories that we'll discover in the world. You'll have spotted some new enemies or modified enemies there with new abilities and elements, even some that fly, which look pretty wild. And in terms of new player abilities, this seems to be tied to Kepler specifically for the moment, although I'm sure we'll learn more soon. But we'll get a bunch of abilities on this destination earned through dark matter. So one of them will allow us to transform into matter spark, and we will for the first time become not guardians, but instead an element with sort of crazy movement and combat capabilities. And they said matter spark will allow us to get into hidden areas or sneak through cracks in walls and over hills, which we can't normally do. Again, there is that combat component to this as well. Other Kepler abilities will include the relocator cannon, which is fallen technology that allows us to bypass laser walls, teleport around the world. But also, there'll be another one called Mattermorph, which is dark matter mixed with strand, and we'll be able to push and move geometry to open routes or build bridges to explore the destination in a totally new way. On the combat side, we'll also be able to throw sort of strand shurikens. And again, there'll always be a combat component to these world abilities, but it does seem that they are tied to Kepler specifically for the moment, as from a lore perspective, some forces on this destination essentially enable us to interact with this, where otherwise, while it may be present, we can't typically do so, right, when we're on Earth, for instance. They also speak about a new character, Lodi, who'll be our guide. We don't know a bunch about them, but Bungie have said they'll have specific attributes which help them understand what's happening in this world, and much like us, they've received an invitation to Kepler, where Fallen and Vex will be key enemies. There is a new House of Exile featured there. And so this does sound pretty interesting. Of course, we'll see how it plays out when we actually get to it, but that's the kind of Edge of Fate specific stuff that they reveal for the moment. Obviously, there will be a lot more to it, but with Ride of the Nine dropping today, this is essentially the first invitation. Bungie also share an event trailer for Ride of the Nine, so check it out right here. Looks pretty cool there. We can see the new unique weapon visuals. And Bungie do say that Right is the prologue for Edge of Fate. It also has an exclusive title and a sort of a light story component that introduces us into what's happening next. Back to Edge of Fate though, Bungie speak about core system changes, like the portal, which they describe as the front page of the game. So much like we saw in the early previews, obviously it's much more finished now, but there'll be solo ops, which are activities for players with short amounts of playtime that don't depend on other players. And again, there'll be guaranteed progression for time investment here, and it's also friendlier for newer players who are learning the game. And they say these playlists will be continuously updated over time. There's also Fireteam ops and Pinnacle ops, and Fireteam ops will have a matchmaking component and LFG functionality. As well as Crucible ops, obviously the sort of focuses for these are sort of self-explanatory, but importantly, they've said that any of these playlists will allow the entire progression grind to be completed in that type of content. So it could be that you max yourself out, max your character out in PvP, but that essentially allows you or enables you to get into sort of the pinnacle power part of the game and readiness for end game content. They touch loosely on new modifiers as well. They show grades of loot that can be earned based on the difficulty we select. They say there'll be something like 50 new modifiers and boons, which will alter gameplay as well. Then there was a section about Armor 3.0 and reward tiers, and this is what the devs had to say on that front.
The first one is Armor 3.0, and the next one is Gear tiers. And so, like, talking about Armor 3.0 first, we are probably making the biggest change ever since Shadowkeep.
It's huge.
The system. It's enormous.
It's a huge change.
Yeah, so like we're adding set bonuses, which is a long requested feature for all the new armor that you're going to be able to get at Edge of Fate launch, and we're redoing all the stats on armor. Where they can now like exceed 100.
Go beyond 100.
Go beyond 100 for extra bonuses.
Yep.
We're going to, every single piece of new legendary armor that drops is going to have all the energy filled in, so you can build crafting right away. And it's going to essentially, like, there's more features actually that I could talk about, but I don't think I'm allowed to yet.
Fair. Well, something that we can talk about too, you mentioned gear tiers as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so gear tiers are very exciting because every single legendary weapon and armor that you can get is going to have 5 gear tiers, starting from 1 going up to 5. And like we have a 5 gear tier 5 piece of legs armor on the screen right now. And you can see that like this is like looks really cool with the iconography, but it also has a ton more stats. And oh look, what's that?
Yeah, what's going on with the energy there?
Yeah, the energy.
Ben?
Yeah, that energy says 11, and it's true.
11. Yep.
It's not a typo. Like energy is going to 11 for higher tier armor. And so if you want that for your build crafting opportunities, because it does like give you some new options you never had before, you're going to have to challenge yourself to get more higher tier armor and keep on going to get yet more higher tier armor to get those options.
Yeah, and this is also not something that's just relegated to armor, right? When it comes to weapons, they're obviously getting their own refresh as well.
Yes.
What's Destiny without chasing some?
You read my mind.
Yeah, like weapons
seriously.
are part of the player identity. You know, some people like have a gun that they love.
You got fashion, and then you have gunplay.
That's
right?
true, though we do have fashion for your guns a bit now.
Hey.
Well, so because once you reach tier 5 for your legendary drops, you're going to be getting tier 5 weapons, and those have unique shader treatment. It's like essentially a completely different look that's going to immediately identify it to you and others that this is the highest tier gear of this drop that you can get. It's going to show on the weapon, it's going to show on the icon, it's even going to show when you kill enemies with that weapon, because there's unique kill effects for tier 5 weapons that you can turn on or off if you don't want it, but your gameplay will like show that, no, yeah, the weapon that is being used is like the highest tier you can get.
Yeah, Giver's Blessing, which I think we have on screen right now. This is one of the Kepler auto rifles, and I cannot put this thing down.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, when we're playing through the Edge of Fate right now, and it's what's really exciting about it for me is that like when you see that tier 5 drop, like you know immediately that's better than like a tier 3 or tier 4 weapon that you have, right? And I think that's when we talk about making Destiny easier to just jump in, find the fun, make it accessible, but also create more depth.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we're thinking about. It's like how can we just make immediate, like you understand, like okay, this is probably better than the thing I have right now, depending on what gear tier it is.
Yeah.
So pretty wild stuff right there. Overall, I think these systems look pretty cool. How they'll interact with our existing gear, of course, we've yet to find out. We will get more details in blogs and things like that, but they've said they'll take specific opportunities to sort of expand on what we're seeing here and give us all of the information about how they'll work. Otherwise, we get a new roadmap of expansions and major updates to the game. They've said major updates will be similar to Into the Light in terms of scale and scope. The first major update will be Ash and Iron, and we're returning to the Plaguelands. So Bungie said there'll be a new activity there, as well as a brand new exotic mission, new rewards, and 2 new exotic weapons that will be featured as part of this free update. They've said this is sort of the blueprint for what they want to do with all of the free updates moving forward. And many of the free seasonal updates will also have multiple events taking place. So they say Heavy Metal is an example of one of these seasonal upgrades. That's the new vehicle combat game mode that we're going to get later this week. They also say there'll be a new Combat Sparrow earnable in Heavy Metal. So of course, this is separate from Edge of Fate because this is launching on Friday, I believe. And so we'll get the first Combat Sparrow by playing this, and they've said there'll be build crafting options built into it. Otherwise, they don't really expand on it, but certainly sounds like an interesting concept. Other event examples that they give, though, includes Arms Week, which will be a week-long event after Edge of Fate drops. And every time it rolls around, it will introduce a new legendary weapon. That weapon will have a holofoil variant, as well as new mods and options to chase rolls on that weapon. So that sounds pretty cool, and part of that will also introduce a shooting range in the tower, and there'll be proper damage testing options here as well. So an environment that features a bunch of different enemies that we can kind of select and spawn. We'll also be able to use abilities there, and it will feature a scoreboard. So if you wanted to jump in with your raid team, you could literally compete against each other to do damage and things like that, which is pretty cool. So there's a sort of social component to this as well. Plus they give examples like Solstice of Heroes, which will also get a new weapon with a holofoil version. So events like this, Arms Week, Heavy Metal, they're all going to be a huge part of the sort of seasonal content delivery moving forward. Otherwise, final notes on the December expansion, they say Renegades will have a dedicated reveal coming in September alongside the Ash and Iron update, and it's a big opportunity to experiment with social interactions. That's one of their core sort of gameplay focuses, but they again give us a sneak peek of this, which does have a pretty surprising twist, so check it out. Now, you've definitely got Star Wars vibes, if you know what Star Wars is. I'm assuming you do. And Bungie literally say this expansion will pay homage to Star Wars. That's somewhat unexpected. It's a bit of a different approach for sure. But they do say this will be a one-of-a-kind Destiny experience with the space western vibe of Star Wars, but through the Destiny lens. And it will introduce a new lawless frontier emerging inside of our system. And we'll basically be heading in to take control of that before it goes wild. So there we go. That's kind of a snapshot look at what Bungie showed off today. Obviously, there's plenty more details we can dig into over time, especially looking at gear and some of the new systems, and Bungie will be giving us more information about those as well. But in terms of pre-orders, they've said they are available now. So if you're interested in that, and the Ultimate Edition of that does indeed unlock New Land Beyond, which is pretty wild. So if you want to get it, head to the Bungie store or your selected platform, and you should be able to find it in the next few hours. Maybe a slight delay on some of it, but overall, I think between the new content and the system changes and the sort of approach in terms of seasonal content delivery, obviously, we never really know until we get to play it, much like we saw with episodes when Bungie announced that, but based on what we've seen, I think there's a lot of promise to improve various systems and the general gameplay experience, and of course, on top of that, we'll get the new content in itself, which will be 2 expansions every year, at least for the next 2 years, based on what Bungie have revealed, but their intention is to go longer than that based on what they've said. So overall, guys, I have to say, I'm definitely excited to check it out, and hopeful that this will be a big push forward for the game on multiple different fronts. So share your thoughts below, but for today, that is the recap. So as always, I hope you found the video useful. Once again, get subscribed as I'll be keeping you up to date with all of the new info as we get it regarding the next expansion or expansions and content updates. So keep it locked and loaded, give us your thoughts in the comment section, and otherwise, I hope you guys have an awesome day.